This is Karen with My I'm Possible Dream, and we are in the ESPN Cleveland studios, although I'm not broadcasting at ESPN Cleveland, but I am with Sam Pines, and we're here to talk about a couple of different things. But the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that he is the father of two young girls,
right,
and one is on the spectrum. Both of them are on the spectrum. Now, that's very unusual.
Yeah.
So let's start out with how old are both girls?
So Ellie is 7 and going into second grade at Lewis and doing great. And then Zoey is 5 and going into another year at Lerner.
Okay.
Whatever the age.
So when I say that's strange, it's very unusual to have a female on the spectrum at all and then to have two daughters that on the spectrum. When did you find out that they were on the spectrum? How old were they?
So Ellie was 4, and then so we started doing ABA with Ellie at home. 4. Yeah, so when she was 4, and then Zoey is very different, as you guys know. You've met one kid on the spectrum. You've met one kid.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, you've met the same parents. So we tried to do the same thing with Zoey, and it didn't work that well. And so Zoey was diagnosed at 3. So I guess it would have been a year and a half or so after Ellie was diagnosed.
So what were some of the things that you noticed that realize that they're not typical?
So very different. So Ellie was probably more typical on the spectrum as far as struggled with transitions, had some, I guess, more outbursts. Both were very speech delayed. So that's where she fit in. Zoe's a much more laid back kid. So even though we should be looking and knowing what we were looking for, Zoey didn't show a lot of signs until really language became more common in her peers. So that's where, Zoey kind of, you can see her on the spectrum is purely on the speech and language, whereas Ellie had more positive markers or whatever a lot of terms go around in my mind, but whatever they are, that's what I would go with.
And really, the terms don't make any difference, especially when you're the parent, because you just want to get them to develop.
Exactly.
Is it possible that, now Zoe's the younger one, correct? So maybe, do you think maybe Zoey was maybe mimicking some of her sister's behavior?
So probably not, because there are, as I said, there's very few similarities as far as what those things that put them on the spectrum. Okay. That's one theory when Zoey wasn't talking right away was, well, her older sister isn't that great with language to begin with. So that was a month or two, and I think as parents you rationalize the first month or two. I always compare it to like when you're at a restaurant and they haven't come and taken your order, and there's like that internal clock that starts to go off, and then you wait a little bit longer, and then finally you say something. And I think with both of them, that's all of a sudden that internal clock starts going off. Like, all right, so they're not talking as much as their peers, or they're not doing something. All right, well, it seems like they should be now. All right, and you're trying not to overreact, but you want to make sure you're reacting.
So let's now talk about Ellie. She's going to a
totally typical school, totally typical classes, friends, sleepovers. At times, like boys, we're working on that. We're trying to push that off another 20 years, 7. So
okay.
We're giving her another 20 to 30 years before she starts dating. But
sounds good.
Yeah, no, but for the most part, a pretty typical 7-year-old life at this point.
Okay.
Get some supports at school, some social groups. Did a camp for all summer at Ganizi at Chabad, and then now we'll do a week of Nicole Garami's camp. So, so 90% was a typical, and then, a week of kind of getting back in the scholastic mode.
And Zoe's been going to learner school.
Right.
And so learner school is pretty well structured for her needs.
Correct.
How's she doing there?
Slow improvement. We saw a huge spike with Ellie, and we saw the learning curve kind of catch up to her peers. Zoe, the slope isn't there, so the difference is getting greater as it goes. But they're great there. They talk to us. I've said I'm really happy with Learner, just not happy with the results. So we're continuing to look at different options, different things, trying out different things, and anything that's we're open to anything other than some of the crazy things you hear about,
right?
Poisons and stuff.
Yeah. So as you're going through this life experience with your two girls, you run into people that maybe see your girls as maybe being a little different. How do you explain to people that they're on the spectrum? Because I know at times that was very difficult for us when Alex was younger.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Now, Alex, you're 20.
Gonna be 25.
25.
Yeah.
Okay,
2 weeks from today.
So when Alex was diagnosed, how
he
old?
was 6.
6. So 1 in how many were getting diagnosed?
1 in 150. So it was different.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's significantly different now, and it's much more common. I mean, I had somebody. I don't know what she was doing. Zoe wasn't responding, or I said I'll tell her. I don't know if we were at a pool or something. And I said, "Oh, is she on the spectrum?" And I was like, "She is," but that's pretty bold to ask that because she wasn't doing anything other than not responding to the lifeguard for what they were saying. And I think it's just so much more common right now that it hasn't seemed as hard as I think it would have been 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago when it was, when the only image that I don't know people my age probably had was a Dustin Hoffman movie.
Right, exactly.
And I think it's so different right now that it's really not hard in those situations to tell people. So I haven't had an issue with it. Others might.
So. And that's good because that's what we are hoping through our initiative is that we can bring out awareness that people aren't going to look at us strangely, that they're going to accept our children. I mean, we're all different. You don't have to be on the spectrum to be different. We all part our hair differently, or we don't have hair. I wasn't going to say that, but I'm going to say it. Do the girls notice that they're different?
So I don't know that Ellie does at this point. And Zoe doesn't have the level of language, if she does, to tell us. Ellie does know that Zoe doesn't talk very much or enough. But I don't think we haven't. At some point with Ellie, we'll have that discussion, and I don't know what shape that discussion takes. I think it depends on her development. But it's not. I wouldn't say she's at a point to totally understand what we would be telling her. I think it's. We've gotten to a great point with Ellie where we want her to go to Learner and see things and learn to be understanding that everyone's different. She's included in that. But I think she, at this point hasn't. I mean, she knows she leaves class 2 or 3 times a day to go to whatever different supports. But it's, but I guess nowadays at least they tell us in the 47-person IEP meetings that a lot of kids leave all the time now, and and if the little bit I've spent at the school, like you just see kids kind of flying back and forth. So it's much more common and much different than what my image of leaving class was.
Right.
In the early 80s.
I know that when Alex was diagnosed, we had a great social worker at the school who convinced us and Alex that every year when he started classes that he would stand up in front of his class and he would let them know that he was on the autism spectrum, which worked out very well for him in elementary school. Elementary school, he got the support he needed. Yeah. It wasn't until you got to junior high,
middle school,
that it failed.
Yeah.
And these were the same kids, basically, that had accepted him all along. But middle school is tough. But it was helpful for us when he was younger because when somebody possibly looked at him strangely or if he had a meltdown, we could at least whisper to him, we understand and we could remove him.
Yeah.
And when we got him away from it, we could then explain to him, this is because of
Sure.
your autism. Do you think Ellie has any idea?
I don't know. It's tough to know. I don't think so. I'll go back to at
and
this
that's
point.
fair.
And I don't know at what age Alex started doing that.
He was 6 when
6,
he
okay.
and he was
Right away.
diagnosed at 6.
Okay, so right
Yeah.
away. That's interesting. No, and she doesn't really have. I mean, she had, and maybe she'll have it again. She had kind of those meltdowns, probably up until 5. She recently had one, but it was at home for the first time in probably 2 years. So that part of it, I hope that it's. I mean, it could be coming back now, but you hope that she seems to self-regulate on an acceptable level. We'll call it.
Well,
like
that's
we'd
good.
love for it to be
Sure.
better, but I think I love that building the confidence of being able to say it, and I think at a certain time the conversation will be had.
And again, that's a family
Right.
decision. And, again, because Alex was diagnosed when he was, and the school sort of intervened, back then we didn't have all the methods that they have today. And so we just went along with it. And like I said, it worked when he was in elementary school. By the time he got to middle school, it was the worst thing that he ever could have done.
Yeah.
I know you have hopes and dreams for your girls. Zoey doesn't talk a lot, so you probably don't know what her hopes and dreams are.
To live on a trampoline. I think.
Oh, she likes a trampoline.
She loves a trampoline, but no.
Okay.
But no.
Maybe
At
she
this
wants
point,
to be a bird or a fairy.
Yeah.
That's okay. What about Ellie?
Ellie's definitely in the acting, dancing. She did dance this past year. She'll do something, maybe cheerleading dance again. She loves to perform. I just saw on my phone last night there was a few performances that she put on a selfie. So she likes the stage. She likes to dance. She has fun. So that's what I would think she'd gravitate towards. But ultimately, I think it's what we want for all of our kids: healthy and happy. And I think the the third piece that no one I think says as much as independence. And ideally, if those 3 things can happen, I mean, Ellie at this point seems like she's definitely on that course, and will challenge us along the way. But probably more typical challenges of just being stubborn. And then Zoey, that remains our hope. She's happy and she's healthy, so it's just figuring out what the trajectory can be on the independent side.
And yet she's still young.
Right.
And one of the things that Alex talks about quite a bit in his speaking engagements is that he didn't realize until he got to college that even though he was 18 when he went to college, socially, he was more like 14.
Sure.
And that could be Zoey as well.
Correct.
So one day you may just walk into her bedroom and find out that Zoey is where she's supposed to be.
Right. Then she'll go on a speaking tour with you.
That she might go on a speaking tour with Alex. And we've seen that with a lot of nonverbals.
Sure.
That all of a sudden one day they wake up and they find their voice. And they can find their voice in other ways too. They can find their voice drawing, painting, writing. So again, whatever that passion is. And when you talked about, you want them to be happy and you want them to find their independence, there's all different forms of happiness and all different forms of independence. And for those parents who are listening to this, if you don't have a child on the spectrum, sometimes I find that I'm being judged when I'm trying to allow Alex to be happy and follow his passion when it looks like I'm spoiling him.
Sure.
But I know that if I were to tell Alex he had to go take a 9-to-5 job and sit in an office, which he could do, he would miserably fail at it. I just know that. More so than somebody who is atypical.
Sure.
And that's most likely what you're going to find with your two girls, too.
Sure.
And so it's not that we're spoiling our kids, but we know for them to be independent, for them to be happy, they need to follow their dream. And that's why we need the community to reach out and help them follow their dreams along the way. So, Sam, we were talking about the girls and their differences. Now, I know I was a working mom trying to take care of Alex, and I actually traveled quite a bit. So either I was out of town and his dad took care of him, or I was in town while his dad traveled. What's the situation at home with your girls?
So Deborah's at home with them. And so she, every morning is getting Ellie on the bus and taking Zoey to Lerner and back, which is probably an hour 10 commute at that point.
Wow.
And, so then she has to get everything done during that time. And then sometimes she's worked out a carpool for Lerner and sometimes not. But, if she has and somebody brings Zoey back, she takes Ellie off the bus, or Ellie comes running off the bus, however it works that day, and then, which is normally running off the bus. And then they have activities every day, really except Friday, which Ellie has informed us is she has stuff every other day, so she wants to rest on Friday.
Oh, okay.
I don't think there's anything religious about it.
Okay.
But that is her wish, so that's generally the time frame. And then Fridays I generally try and be home relatively early for dinner.
But your schedule's pretty darn busy. You're busy here at Good Karma.
Yeah, so I'm normally out before anyone's awake, and then I try and, if I'm in town, I'm trying to be home by 6 or a little before 6, and then the weekends. And then I'm probably, might be out of town maybe 5 days a month, 5-6 days a month.
That's not too bad.
No. Do you want to tell Deborah?
Do I want to tell Deborah that?
No, it wasn't too
well,
bad.
I 5-6 days. I mean, that could be a lot because what I was going to say is, does Deborah have a support system?
So we have a decent Rolodex. She's built a decent Rolodex of babysitters that we use, but we don't have family, so that part of it is tougher for us. But we've, Cleveland's an incredibly welcoming community, so we've made a lot of friends, had a lot of good sitters, so that's been a good support. But not to minimize the difficulty of her job.
And she's from Madison, Wisconsin.
Correct.
So that's where all her family is.
Her parents are there.
Okay. And you're from Chicago?
Yeah.
So, Alex, I think you wanted to ask him some questions about Chicago?
Yeah. Okay. So I learned this from Munch.
Okay.
And by the way, folks, this is where the show really gets good and fun. Anyways, so Munch told me you are a Cubs fan. Now, I think you were saying before we went on that you're not as much about the present Cubs, and rightfully so. I mean, until this year,
right.
What if they had the show for it?
Exactly.
But what were your favorite moments, as a Cubs fan?
So, and I still say I'm a Cubs fan, but I just don't know the team like I used to. Mm-hmm. But the favorite moments, I guess now being a Cleveland sports fan, mm-hmm. I can point to when I was 9 in '84 and the Cubs were up 2-0 against the Padres, and we're going to go to the World Series for the first time since, I think it was 1949.
Yeah, it was somewhere around there.
And they haven't won one since like 08.
Yeah.
So 1908. I used to be able to say 08. I have to go
back
to the other 08.
Yep.
So it was a great series. It was a lot of fun until the last 3 games, which I think started to prepare me to be a Cleveland sports fan. And then, but with the Cubs, it was really, I didn't live that far from Wrigley. I was about 20 minutes if there was no traffic. But, growing up, you could take the L. You could go to games. my first couple of years out of college, I lived, not too far from Wrigley in Lincoln Park in Wrigleyville. So it was, the Cubs just have this fun team spirit about them. But those 80s teams into the 90s were probably my most vivid memories and most fun memories of the Cubs.
So would Ryan Sandberg be one of your favorites?
Yeah, Sandberg, Dawson, even back to the Gary Matthews years. So there are a lot of great players, but Sandberg was in all those teams.
Now, one of my favorite announcers of all time is the legendary Harry Carey.
Yes.
So I'm assuming you listened to a lot of games.
I did.
What was it like listening to Harry Carey call a game? Because a lot of the younger people just don't understand or don't appreciate how good he was.
Yeah, he had energy that probably no other announcer might ever match, and just a fandom that I don't know that announcers have coming through the world as it's set up nowadays. And Harry Carey, and I don't know what year it was, but I was really young, but he was at the White Sox before the Cubs.
Yeah, that's right.
And then went to the Cubs, so I actually heard him on both sides of town, and he was hilarious. I mean, he'd sit in the bleachers for a game or two a year.
Yeah.
There's something actually about, as I listened to him over there's something about Munch and Harry Carey that I think are pretty similar. And they were both Bud guys, so
But there was nothing like probably, because I bet you've been to Indians games, also Cubs games, probably some our games too, but there's nothing like a game at Wrigley. That's from what I've heard.
Yeah, Wrigley, there's a few places I think where the sport is just too perfect. Wrigley and Fenway are two that I would put out there. Lambeau would probably be the other one. But Wrigley Field is still just an amazing place to watch a baseball game.
And it's so good that the Cubs are finally coming back. I mean, they're right there. They're in the playoff race. I know they were looking into Carlos Carrasco. Thank God, Antonetti, you did not make that deal, which we've heard rumored had Javier Baez, a shortstop second baseman who has 40 homer potential, but he strikes out a lot. Thank God you didn't do that, Antonetti, because I would have come in there and I would have gotten you, because you should have gotten Jorge Soler, their right fielder, who I've been extremely high on. But anyways, the Cubs look good. What other teams did you root for growing up?
It was all the Chicago teams.
All the Chicago teams.
And there's I think you might like this, but most won't. And Michigan.
Whoa! I like that one.
That was growing up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He's come around, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have the rights of the defending national champion. So
oh my gosh!
Hey, I can't get mad at him about that.
Not this year.
We're not going to talk bad about that team here.
Yeah, but no, it's so it was the Chicago teams. The Blackhawks really were not part from about probably the time I was 10 until I left Chicago. They were, I think, historically bad. So
now they're just
now they're great, but so the Blackhawks really weren't part of it. But it was really the Cubs, Sox, Bulls, and Bears. And so I grew up through the Michael years, which I understand in Cleveland were portrayed differently than I remember them.
Yeah.
But it was a fun time, and then I went to college out east with a bunch of Knicks fans, and Jordan kept beating them, so that made it a lot of fun. So it was. Those Jordan years, the 85 Bears, are probably some of my best memories.
So I'm going to use this as the last question. Knowing from what you've experienced in Chicago, how awesome would it be for when the day comes? I'm not saying if. It is happening, Cleveland. What is it going to be like for you now living here when Cleveland finally ends it?
Yeah, I literally can't imagine it. I think I've tried to compare it to the Cubs, and what will Wrigleyville be like on that day, and if they can clinch in Chicago at Wrigley, it'd be awesome. But I don't. That was probably early when I lived here, the first couple of years, going through the 07 Indians and some of and then the.
Let me just say something about the 07 Indians. Mother, you were supposed to give me a Game 5 ticket. I still blame you to this day.
But they didn't win. It would have been so depressing to be there.
We would have won because I would have been there. That's the point,
God.
Sam. Sorry.
Okay, whatever.
So the, and going through some of the the crushing defeats just of the last 10 years, and obviously the decision, I've come around to how it would be like nothing, I think. I don't know that anyone's ever seen, and it'll be fun, and I'm looking forward to when it happens. So which team is going to do it?
Who do you think? It's the Cavs. Come
Definitely?
on.
All right.
I am sold after what happened in the finals. LeBron, I think, has sort of got the mindset of it isn't happening again. If I get there one more time, I'm not letting it happen again.
Even with all the miles on his legs.
Even with all the if that turns out to be the final series of his career, he is going to make sure it doesn't happen a third time.
Okay.
There's just something about the way he was acting at the end of that finals. Like, when he's saying he has nightmares about it, I truly believe he has nightmares about it. And I really do think it's fueling him into a PO'd LeBron, which I don't want to face a PO'd LeBron as much as I don't want to face Ronda Rousey after seeing that look the other night.
Right.
Anyways, but I just think they've made the right moves. They get JR back. I think Sasha Khan could be a nice piece there as well. And maybe at some point you throw in one last piece because of the trade exceptions. I think you do have a legit shot. I just don't know if it's enough because I do like the Spurs. I do like the Warriors. And I am scared of the Thunder. But I just think if LeBron gets there and he has the team around him, he's going to say it's not happening a third time.
Can they lose to anyone in the East?
No. I just don't see it. The only team that scares me, and I think your president of Good Karma Broadcasting Companies will like this,
The Bucks.
I am scared as heck of that team. Let me just say something. It was a few years ago on 3D, the night before the draft, I made a bold prediction that the Cavs should have listened to. Draft Giannis Antetokounmpo number 1, and he was my number 1 player available, which no expert in this country had. They're all like, oh, well, it could be Len, it could be Noah. I said, no, you have not seen film. This kid can score. And in 2 short years, he's improving. You got Jabari coming back, Greg Monroe, Michael Carter-Williams, O.J. Mayo, not to mention Plumlee's there as well, and Ennis. That is a scary team. And Jason Kidd.
Yeah.
That's the only team that I think I would be scared of. I'm not scared of the Bulls anymore. I'm not. I just don't think the coaching fit was the right fit.
And if they're playing the Bucks, I don't know if I'd be rooting for. Actually, I would be rooting for the Bucks, but other than that, I'll root for the Cavs.
We understand why, but we won't.
But over the Bulls, I would take the Cavs over.
Yeah, definitely. So that's basically what I have.
That's what you have.
Yeah.
So what got you into ESPN?
So Craig, so my best friend in college is Steve Politziner, who grew up with Craig. After college, the 3 of us traveled cross country. My friend Steve went to Arthur Anderson in New York. I went to Arthur Anderson in Chicago. Craig started this company. Over the next 3 years, he convinced 5 of us to join him as partners and leave corporate America. We went to Madison, Wisconsin, learned to sell radio at the time, and then from there we just grew into the various businesses we have now, which ESPN Cleveland's one of them. So that's fun.
Just like that.
Just like
that.
Some of us had hair, the rest of us didn't have gray hair, so it was a much different time. But we definitely didn't have kids or wives to tell us what we were doing was crazy.
Well, actually, it didn't turn out to be crazy. It must have been a good passion. It must have been a dream, and you've worked on it and you've created it. I must say that until Alex sat in on 3D, I never would have listened to ESPN Cleveland. Now I actually listen to Tony Rizzo and Gerard every morning.
Nice.
I listen to Emmett and Goldhammer.
Nice.
And when I can, I listen to Munch.
Good. We love it.
I cannot believe, folks, that this woman here listens to as much sports. But Alex still talks way over my head.
And let me just add something to this, because I think it should be noted with Sam here. A few years ago, for people that want to know part of the story, I had a meeting with Sam. And Sam told me flat out, you have talent, but you got to start at the bottom and work your way up. And, I left that meeting and I said, boy, that was deflating. I thought I was good. I thought I was good. But it was the best advice you could have given to me. It was the harsh truth that I needed to hear instead of, oh, yeah, you've got talent. You can do it. No, I need to know that, yes, you have talent, but you have to work on your craft. So in those 9 months that I was working at supposed, unnamed station, I remembered those words. You have talent, but you need to continue working at it. There were days where I was like, man, I just don't want to do this. And I'm like, no, you got to labor through it. This is part of your development as a broadcaster. And when I left, it was more of me not agreeing with the direction. So it was a legit reason to walk out and leave. But I also had to make sure, am I at a point as a broadcaster that I could go elsewhere and take that next step? And I felt comfortable when I left. Yes, I could. And so with everybody listening, I want to thank you again for giving me the harsh truth, because with people on the spectrum, people are afraid to give you the harsh truth. But when you do with the right people, I know some may not take it well, but with the right person, as long as you know them, they're not going to probably take it as hard. They'll be disappointed. They might be a little deflated, but sometimes they'll use it as motivation. They won't forget it, and they'll go like, okay, you want to know what? Let's put it in perspective. So thank you for telling me, you have the talent, but you need to continue working on it.
Well, thanks for listening. I tell a lot of people a lot of things, but it's always good to hear that somebody listened. So I appreciate it. Keep it up. You're doing great.
Well, we found out earlier that other people around here listen too. So in our previous interview, we were told that he listens to you and he learns from you.
That's right.
So we're just very, very impressed around here.
Thank you.
We also want to thank you, Sam, for getting ESPN Cleveland on board for the upcoming Walk for Autism on August 23rd. We know that Gerard Cherry is going to be our wonderful MC, which I am just so thrilled about. I know Alex is on cloud nine. And we welcome everybody at the station to come on down. We have phenomenal entertainment that day, including Alex Hale. He will make it on the stage this year. He won't be stuck up in the air on an airplane coming back from California.
Cleveland Hopkins radar will not be dead because I will not have to rely on them.
But again, everyone has potential. We look forward to hearing more about Ellie and Zoey, and I know they're going to just blossom. Tell Deborah we thank her for everything that she does, and if we can be of any help in the future, just give us a call.
We will. Thanks, and congrats. What you guys are doing is great.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Sure. Thanks.